We're glad you're able to join us today for our next edition of the 49er Industry Chat. My name is Noemi Guevara, and I am the Director of Alumni Engagement at Cal State Long Beach. Before we start our session today, I would just like to let you know this session is being recorded and will live on our website at csulb.edu/alumni. We also encourage you to submit any questions to our speaker today using the Q&A box located below. And now I'd like to introduce you to our moderator for the chat. Cynthia Saavedra is our Director of University Initiatives. Cynthia, thank you so much for moderating the chat today. And now I turn it over to you.
Great, thank you so much, Noemi, and welcome to everyone joining us today. Eric Draper is a proud graduate of Long Beach State University, holding a Bachelor of Arts degree in news journalism. Eric served as President George W. Bush's chief White House photographer for the entire 8 years of his presidency. Draper was named Special Assistant to the President and is the first White House photographer to be named a commissioned officer to a U.S. president. Also during his tenure, Draper directed the photographic and archival conversion of the White House photo office from film to digital and took nearly 1 million photos documenting the presidency. Prior to joining the White House, Draper was West Regional Enterprise Photographer for the Associated Press. In 8 years with the AP, Draper covered an array of domestic and international news and sports. Draper's also worked as a staff photographer for the Seattle Times, the Pasadena Star-News, and the Albuquerque Tribune. Draper is currently a freelance corporate and editorial photographer based in Rio Rancho, New Mexico, where he lives with his wife and 3 dogs. He is an obsessive Laker fan, which is great. I'm sure you're in good company today. Please welcome today's Industry Chat host, Mr. Eric Draper.
Thank you. Thank you very much for inviting me. This is a great opportunity to speak to everyone and to give some background about my career and what I've been blessed to do for many, many years. What I'd like to do is show you a lot of photos and tell some stories. And I want to kind of start with actually what I'm currently doing as a photographer based here in Albuquerque, New Mexico. See here, make sure, can everyone see a photo?
Perfect, looks good.
Okay, good. So so currently I do a lot of corporate work here in New Mexico. There's Virgin Galactic, which has been getting a lot of news lately. Richard Branson here is starting to, wants to have the record of being the first space tourism company to take people out in space. So that's one of my clients. I do some celebrity portraiture here in New Mexico. The film industry is becoming a big, is booming out here. Netflix just announced that they're going to have their hub of production here in New Mexico, which is a really big news here for this state, and hopefully I can tap more into the movie industry here. Some concert photography. I do some travel photography whenever I travel around for my clients. This image was taken in Istanbul, Turkey. Back here in the States, this is in Wyoming. Here in New Mexico, I made this picture actually, I didn't have to go too far from home. This is actually a roadrunner that just grabbed a lizard, and this is the corner of my house in New Mexico that I captured out the window of my car. I still do keep my toes in politics. Even after the White House, I was Mitt Romney's campaign photographer when he ran for president in 2012. I want to go back to my early years before the White House, which kind of led me down the road to become the White House photographer. And that's the number one question I get is, how do you become the White House photographer? And every White House photographer has a different story of how they ended up in the White House. And in my case, it really wasn't a plan. It was an opportunity that really presented itself. But during my years prior to the White House, I was an AP photographer for 8 years. And the Associated Press sent me around the world. They sent me to Haiti. With this image shows this Haitian, which in the mid-1990s, the U.S. was sent in, the Marines were sent in to restore order for the return of President Aristide. just to give you a quick history, when I transferred to Cal State Long Beach from Cerritos College. And at the time, Long Beach State had a great photojournalism department. And I decided to pursue photojournalism, and I wanted to be a newspaper photographer. So that's what I did for many years. Right after Long Beach State, I was able to get a job at the Seattle Times. I actually met my wife at Cal State Long Beach as well in the journalism department. She was a writer, and I was a photographer on the newspaper staff. So it was a perfect match. This photo here is the Associated Press sent me to Japan to cover the aftermath of the Kobe earthquake. And again, this is in the mid-90s. The Associated Press sent me to the border of Macedonia and Kosovo. And I believe this was 1998. And there was a big refugee crisis. The war in Kosovo was creating this humanitarian crisis of refugees fleeing that war, and they're all headed toward the border of Macedonia. And the Macedonians did not want all the refugees, and they were kind of stuck in this what they call no man's land. And it was a horrific story to cover. I was there for a couple of months covering this story. Also back in Los Angeles, when I was working here in Los Angeles for the Associated Press, I covered the O.J. Simpson trial. The AP sent me to London to cover the funeral for Princess Diana. So I got around quite a bit. The AP was an amazing experience. And again, my wife was also a writer at the AP, so that really helped as well. I covered a lot of sports for the Associated Press. This is the Winter Olympics in Nagano, Japan. That's Tara Lipinski, who was the youngest gold medalist in the figure skating. And that's me, by the way, in my younger years. And I covered politics, which in 2000, the Associated Press assigned me to cover the Bush campaign. And I spent nearly a year traveling with all the journalists, just part of the crowd, never ever expecting to end up in the White House. And it wasn't actually until after the election that I literally decided to pursue the position. You might remember, if you look in your history books, I can't believe this is over 20 years ago. The election in 2000 wasn't decided that night. You might remember it was Gore versus Bush, and the Supreme Court had to rule weeks later. Well, it was after the election that I decided that I really had a shot at doing the job. And just out of curiosity, I started calling around to find out who was the White House photographer. And the more I investigated it, the more I realized I had a shot at this position. And they say timing is everything. Well, I discovered I was invited to a Christmas party in Austin, Texas. And Governor Bush had just become President-elect Bush. So it was perfect timing. So what I decided to do was take a page out of his playbook, because during the campaign, he would always say, I'm going to look you in the eye and ask you for the job. I want to be your president. So that's what I did at the party. I walked up to him, and my wife was there, coaching me on the sidelines to make my move. And I came prepared. I had a portfolio with me. I had a cover letter. The staff knew what I wanted to do, but I knew approaching him directly would help. And so, and I asked him, I said, I want to be your personal photographer. And he looked at me like he never thought about it before. And it was this very long handshake. I never forget it. And he looked at me, he said, I really appreciate that. And then the president said, I'll get back to you. Well, a week later, I'm back in Austin, Texas, sitting in front of Andy Card, interviewing for the position of the chief White House photographer. And there are two things that I never forget, which, this job just really turned my world upside down. Like I never owned a suit before this job. And by the way, if you don't recognize me in this picture, I'm the second guy on the left in this group photo. But it was an amazing 8 years from start to finish. During that interview with Andy Card, he told me that working at the White House is like drinking water through a fire hose at full throttle. And he was right. 9/11, the war in Afghanistan, the war in Iraq, the Shuttle Columbia disaster. We had 2 funerals for 2 presidents, a funeral for a pope. We had the worst natural disaster in history, Hurricane Katrina, the worst economic crisis since the Great Depression. I took nearly 1 million images during my 8 years in the White House. I traveled to nearly 70 countries. And what I want to do is tell you kind of my 8-year story. And I had this incredible body of work after 8 years. And at the very beginning of it all, this is actually before the swearing in ceremony, January 17th, 2001. And I'm standing there at the top of the stairs of the airplane, and the president he wasn't president yet, he was still president-elect. And I'm standing there wondering what my job would be like, because no one, there's no rule book for this position. And this was the first time I was able to see him after I got the position. And I made this picture of him walking up the stairs, looking back at Texas for the last time. He's holding very symbolic. And right after I made this picture, he walked up to me and he said, "Welcome aboard, Eric. We will see the world together. We will see everything." And that really set me at ease. And I thought, wow, this is gonna be a great ride. January 20th, 2001, the traditional coffee with the incoming president and the outgoing president. And this is something that did not happen just a couple of weeks ago in the Blue Room. But this is the tradition before every inauguration, every morning. The 43rd president, President Bush, walking into the Oval Office for the very first time. And on Inauguration Day, by the way, is like inside the West Wing is chaos. You have like movers and painters and carpenters, and everyone is discovering where their office is going to be in the Oval Office, in the West Wing. And I discovered my office was actually in the basement of the West Wing, and my office was the old barber shop. And there are photos of President Ford getting his hair cut. There are pictures of LBJ getting his hair cut, and the original mirror was still there that my desk sat in front of. And I never forget the phone rang that early evening, and there was a voice that said, "Eric, you need to get to the Oval Office now." But I didn't know where the Oval Office was because it was my first time there. So I grabbed my cameras and I go screaming through the halls, and they pointed me out into the Rose Garden. Was the best position to be, because the president was just walking over from the residence in the darkness. And he walked into the Oval Office, and I walked in the Oval Office backwards to make this picture. And right behind him, his father was there with him. And right away, I'm capturing history. I was just amazed at what I witnessed, and even from day one. And this image here is interesting because you have the several layers. You have the proud father with his son sitting at the Oval Office desk, the famous Resolute desk. You have the history of 2 presidents together, only the second son of a president to become president. And then you have the story behind the story. So you see that cord coming from the wall. Well, that was a massage chair that was there that first day. And President Bush is actually turning it on at this moment, which is leading to the laughter. Also on that very first day, this is actually after the entire day. So you think about what transpires on Inauguration Day, the swearing in ceremony, all the stuff that happens at the Capitol, the parade, all of the balls. And so I was able to talk the staff into putting me in the limousine. And I was able to get inside the limousine to photograph the president and the first lady on their way to the very last ball of the night, which is like, there are like a dozen balls that they go to. And I captured this very human moment of the president. They're tired by the end of the night. And what I love about this photo, this is a great example of their personalities, because President Bush, he's an extrovert, and Mrs. Bush is more reserved. So right away, I'm able to capture like just the humanity of the presidency, which was really unique. The Oval Office, you might notice here the rug is blank because this is early, like the first month of the administration, and every president gets to decide what rug goes into the Oval Office. They decide what furniture, the paintings, and months later, the rug that Mrs. Bush, the First Lady, designed looked like this in the Oval Office. And I was able to mount a camera on the top of the Oval Office to get this overview. And in particular, the event that day, you can see that is Pope Benedict was visiting for the very first time, and I tried to get that heavenly view from the Oval Office. And this is kind of the reverse angle where you can kind of see what the ceiling of the Oval Office looks like. You see there's an embossed seal. And my routine, I had the president's schedule, I had his private schedule, I had his official schedule, and I tried to document everything that was written and everything in between, even all the surprises, which to me that was the fun part of using my photojournalism skills to tell the behind the scenes story, the story that was just unfolding in front of me. I like to call this photo timing is everything. And President Bush was very timely. He really kept his staff hopping in terms of being on time, and he hated when the schedule ran late. He felt that if people were waiting for him, he felt it was rude. So early on, I took this photo, I think the second week of the administration, I was just like in the right place at the right time to lift my camera to capture both the president and the vice president checking their watches. The president alone in the Oval Office, where the president isn't really alone. He always has all eyes on him, and the Secret Service and his staff. What I loved about the Oval Office is all walks of life. You have a Boy Scout visiting, an old friend from Texas, to a new world leader. This is President Karzai from Afghanistan visiting the Oval Office for the very first time. A very powerful moment here with the Martin Luther King family, and that's the late Coretta Scott King on the left. This is in 2002, and she's actually, at the time, Coretta Scott King was raising funds for the MLK Memorial, which wasn't built yet. And my routine for every meeting would be to kind of document the beginning of the meeting, and I would leave depending on the nature of the meeting and come back. But I remember as I was leaving, Bernice King, the daughter in the middle, asked the president if he would pray with her family, and I immediately did an about face and jumped in to capture this quiet moment. So documenting President Bush for 8 years, I was able to have the opportunity to not only document the president as commander-in-chief, but as a father, as a dog owner, as a son, but also as just a funny guy. I mean, in terms of like just his humor, which he had a knack of using humor just at the right time to release that pressure of the job. I mean, he didn't take himself too seriously, but he took the job of the presidency very seriously, sometimes at the expense of the First Lady. This is, he's putting on his boots, the inauguration for the second term for the Texas Black Tie and Boots Ball. This is kind of a fun moment here. During the second term, the president became an avid mountain biker, and so every world leader that would visit would give him a bike as a gift. And this particular, I think this was the president of Indonesia, gave the president a fold-up bike, and he had to try it out. And he actually rode through the West Wing. It was really pretty funny that day. Another aspect to being with President Bush for 8 years is documenting his family. Whenever he and his father were together, it was like a magical moment. First of all, they look so alike. And something you learn right away is when you say Mr. President, they both turn around. So you have to, sometimes they refer to them as President 41, President 43. This is a portrait I made of them, the two of them together, sitting just for me at Camp David. And this is something I wanted to do for many, many years, just to show that likeness of how much they looked alike. I thought it worked pretty well, and I was able to set up a nice lighting setup. And his father, George H.W. Bush, would visit the Oval Office a lot. This is in the private dining room adjacent to the Oval Office, and that portrait hanging there is a portrait of John Q. Adams. Again, the first son of a president to become president. Kind of a fun moment with the First Lady inside Buckingham Palace. This was an election night in 2004. And the presidential pets. Barney, one of 2 Scottish Terriers he had. He called Barney the son he never had. The Western White House in Crawford, Texas was a place where the president could unwind. He had 1,600 acres to roam. He was very proud of his ranch. He would take people on tours, and people always ask me, what's my favorite photo? This is one of my favorite pictures from the 8 years, and because of the iconic nature of the picture, but also the timing of the picture, because this is a month before 9/11. So this was taken in August of 2001. So every time I see this photo, I see a sense of innocence before the world changed. And I was with President Bush on 9/11 at the elementary school in Sarasota, Florida that morning. And these photos show what happened behind the scenes that day and the days that followed. And this picture was taken before, right after the famous whisper in the ear when Andy Card walked up to the president with the school children. And there was this hold room when he left that classroom. And you can see what's interesting is the timing. You see the clock on the wall there is about 9:12, 9:13. And the president, and I walked into the room and I was like just kind of shocked from that vision of the live pictures of the towers on that television screen. That's what the towers looked like at the time burning. And the president really just kind of got to work. He didn't stop to look at the photo at the TV. He grabbed a notepad and he started to write, collect his thoughts, because he was already thinking about his statement to the nation and to the world in a reaction to the attacks. And you can see here the clock there. It's a little over almost 9:20. And it wasn't until nearly 9:25 when the president finally looked at the television screen, which we were seeing the replay of the second tower getting hit by the second airplane, and that fireball that's burned into everyone's memory. And everything was focused on New York. No one had any clue what yet was to come. So the president did make a statement at the elementary school. We boarded the motorcade. We headed to Air Force One. And this image here is the president, his very first few moments on Air Force One. I never forget walking up the stairs of the airplane, and Andy Card, the chief of staff, was standing at the stairs, at the top of the stairs, and he was telling everyone to remove their batteries out of their cell phones, because we didn't know if we were being tracked. We didn't know if we were a target. And in this image here, the president is actually having an argument with Andy Card. He's very, very, very heated, because he's telling Andy Card that he wanted to get back to Washington right away. The president, he wanted to lead from the Oval Office. He didn't want to look like he was on the run. So between that motorcade ride from the school to Air Force One, we heard that the Pentagon was hit. The Capitol and the White House were evacuated. The vice president was evacuated to a secure location. The entire airspace had been shut down at that stage. And we're just talking within 10 to 15 minutes. And we took off from Florida. And what I learned later was the pilot of Air Force One, Colonel Tillman, took Air Force One out into the Gulf of Mexico, and we were just flying around in circles. I mean, we didn't know where we were headed. Basically, everything turned toward the president's safety. We wanted to make sure that he was safe. So that's what we did the entire day, and that's one of the reasons why the president didn't return to Washington right away. And that's what's happening in these images here is Andy Card with the Secret Service, with the military aide, you know, the guy that carries the nuclear codes, the football on the left. They're discussing how to keep the president safe, where to keep him safe. And we were hearing all kinds of threats aboard the airplane. We heard that a car bomb had exploded in front of the State Department, which was false. We heard that a fast-moving object was heading towards the president's ranch, which was false. The president himself walked out of the cabin and said, "I just heard that Angel is the next target," and Angel is the code name for Air Force One. The president being told again that we couldn't return to Washington, he was very, very frustrated that we couldn't get back to Washington right away. We heard that Flight 93 had been hijacked. The president in this image is watching the collapse of the Twin Towers. It's just utterly helpless on TV, just watching that happen. We ended up landing in Barksdale, Louisiana, at the Air Force Base there for the first time. And I thought my story would be over. I thought I would be, you know, because they separated the staff, they pared down the airplane. We had a lot of visitors, including congressmen aboard the airplane, but I kind of just stuck with it. And until they said no, but they never said no, I just kept on photographing. And we were on the ground for a couple of hours. And you can see the frustration of the president building on his face because we couldn't return to Washington. We ended up going to Nebraska to another Air Force base at Offutt Air Force Base. And the president was on the ground there for a while. And we finally learned that we're headed back to Washington by late afternoon. And for me personally, my wife had just moved to DC 5 days prior to 9/11. It was like, you know, welcome to DC, right? You know, it was really, and I was fearful to a degree, but I knew that she wasn't working, and I was hoping she was home. But it was the first time that afternoon they allowed us to call from the airplane, and I'll never forget my wife answering the phone, and my first words to her were, "Honey, I'm going to be a little late tonight," and I can hear her laughing through her tears. So we finally are headed back to Washington, and as we were landing at Andrews Air Force Base, the staff and the president were able to see the fighter jets that were escorting us that entire day, and they're almost literally touching the wings of Air Force One. And out of the other side of the plane, you can see the plume of smoke still rising from the Pentagon. Back at the White House, the president was able to finally meet face-to-face with the vice president, who was holed up in the basement of the White House in the bunker. And the president did address the nation that evening to discuss the attacks of the country. September 12th, the next day after, you can see the newspaper headlines that were, and this is the outer oval, where the president's secretary sits. The president visited the Pentagon on September 12th to see firsthand to see the damage, but also to thank rescue personnel. September 14th was the day of national prayer, and the president spoke. And after he spoke, he returned to his chair, and his father reached over to touch his hand. We also traveled to New York City to Ground Zero to see what happened firsthand. And at Ground Zero, you can still feel the heat from the destruction. And I had covered lots of disasters through the years as a news photographer, but never ever did I see anything like this, like mountains and mountains of debris. And the firefighters emotionally were very, very angry. They were frustrated. No survivors are being found, and they really wanted the president to do something. You can feel it. They're hugging him. It was like we're standing on a raw nerve. They were saying, "Go get him, George," and the president really stepped up and delivered when he spoke with the bullhorn, and he said that, you know, the firefighters are screaming, "I can hear you," and he said, "I can hear you. The world hears you, and the people who knock these buildings down will hear from all of us soon." And all the firefighters just erupted in chanting "USA, USA," and he really, really did lift the spirits of those firefighters that in that moment, and the country. He visited with the family of the missing, another just tragic, just really emotional moments here. That there are family members walking around with photos of the missing. There are people with handwritten signs. Have you seen my father? Have you seen my mother? And we're talking thousands of people that were missing. And he also met this woman here, Arlene Howard, who gave the president this badge, which was worn by her son, who died on 9/11 that day. And the president carried that badge in his pocket to tell the personal story of George Howard, who died on 9/11. Just some photos of Air Force One, which I think that's what I'll miss the most, traveling the world on that airplane. I mean, I really wish I'd been able to receive air miles, but that's not how the government works, unfortunately. A couple of foreign trips here. This is in Israel with Prime Minister Omert, one of those kind of goofy moments that happen behind the scenes. This is the president traveling to Albania, the first US sitting president to travel to that country. And then jumping way ahead, November of 2008, and this is the famous transition meeting. And this is after Barack Obama won the election, and every president has this meeting, except of course it didn't happen again this last time. But this was President-elect Obama's first time in the Oval Office, and I actually had to set up a remote camera to capture this moment because this meeting was so tense, and they only allowed me in this meeting in terms of staff and personnel. And I was standing on the other side of that coffee table, and they're looking at me like, "Okay, Eric, are you done?" And so, but this remote camera I had set up on the mantle above the fireplace as a backup. And as I left the Oval Office and the door closed, I fired off 2 frames to get this moment here, the two of them starting their discussions. And the president leaving the Oval Office 8 years later, and on the airplane back to Texas, back home. And you might remember the image of the president leaving Texas for the last time before becoming president. Well, this is the president returning as the former president. And that's my last slide for now. And so I'd love to take questions.
Thank you, Eric, so much. That was a powerful timeline of American and world history. So thank you so much for sharing your collection of images. So we have a couple questions. I'll just kind of go through a couple. First off, obviously there were a lot of very emotional experiences and unfortunately tragedies in history that you experienced directly from the White House. So how is it that you keep yourself centered? What is your process to stay focused on capturing the history and not getting caught up in the moment?
It was hard sometimes, because everyone's human, being in front of so many emotional, powerful situations and trying to do my job, but also respect the dignity and privacy of people. It was a tightrope. Lucky for me, I was able to kind of focus on my job as a photographer. Technically, having a camera in my face would actually hide my tears, which would help a lot. But I think, the experience I had prior to the White House and seeing a lot of disasters and seeing a lot of horrific scenes, I think kind of helped me deal with it, with a lot of things that I witnessed in the White House. But it was definitely a struggle.
Yeah. What about your experience? Obviously, you had some very coveted positions, obviously leading up to, even before, after the White House. Did you have any internships? How did you grow your skills?
Yeah, internships are a key. For me, like I said before, I transferred to Cal State Long Beach, so I had experience as on a newspaper staff that I had already prior to Long Beach State, but then the journalism program at Long Beach State was a whole nother level where I joined the newspaper staff there. I had was able to go through that program, the entire journalism program at the college. But then I had 2 internships during my time at Long Beach State. I was able to land an internship. My first one actually was in Raleigh, North Carolina, at a pretty big size, large size paper. It was the Raleigh News and Observer for a summer. It was like my first time away from home, first time, first job. It was a paid internship, so it was great. So that was a great experience. When I returned, I was able to land an internship at the LA Times as well. So that helped a lot. And then lucky for me, right out of college, I landed a job at the Seattle Times. So there's no gap there. I was able to go straight into a position there. But internships to get that professional experience, but also to work and to learn from real professionals, that would take you under their wing and kind of teach you the ropes. That was really one of the biggest pluses ever. Yeah. Absolutely.
And talk to us a little bit about what you feel might be necessary for someone joining the field now, right? So for students, recent alums, what skill sets do you feel are valuable now? Obviously, looking retrospectively of your own career, what skills, what qualities do you feel are essential to kind of survive in your field?
I think nowadays you have to keep up with the technology. It's evolving so quickly. I mean, I'm going to forget during my time, and we're shooting black and white film. We're processing our own film and handling the negatives and printing. And at the time, we're talking, late 80s, and I remember my photojournalism instructor, Wayne Kelly, would always say, someday we're not going to use film. It'll be all electronic, and I didn't believe him at the time, but he was right. And it's one of those things where you have to embrace the technology and keep on top of it, or else it'll leave you behind. So that was important. But getting a diverse range of experience. I think one of the things that attracted me to photojournalism to begin with was shooting sporting events. Having that front row seat to a basketball game or something that I loved at the time, and but then growing from there and expanding your experience to be able to relate to people in order to tell stories. Like hard stories, like when you're dealing with tragedy, when you're dealing with news, where you have to be somewhat sensitive. You have to be diplomatic. You can't just go in like you're a robot, and you have to respect the people that you're documenting. So you learn that along the way as well.
Storytelling, that narrative, very, very impactful, especially through photography where there are no words. So I can only imagine it's a learned skill. Talk to us a little bit about the background check. Obviously working in the White House, having the access that you did. What was that process?
Well, it's pretty intense. They do have a 6-month FBI background check. And when they say that they'll talk to your 3rd grade school teacher, they mean it. I mean, they talk to friends of friends. They talk to everyone. And yeah, that's a big part of the job is passing that background check. And for my position, I was I had top secret clearance as well. So it was really necessary in my position in order to be in a lot of those meetings and situations at the White House.
You also talked about your wife being along the journey with you. Obviously she was in the field, and so to a certain respect that assists. But someone has a question about the work-life balance. How, obviously you're on the road, you travel quite a bit. What does work-life balance look like working for a president?
There's no balance. It's all it's all lopsided. That was the toughest thing is being away from home, being totally consumed with the job, because my life was the president's schedule. Even when I wasn't with the president or photographing him, I knew exactly where he was. You know, I had pagers and alert notices knowing where he was. But for me, my wife worked in the administration as well. She worked in the White House for 3 of the years. So that really helped a lot in terms of being able to work together, but also to have that understanding and to share that experience together. You know, one of the biggest perks was I had West Wing parking. So, you know, the gates would open up and we would drive through the, you know, together, and I would park right next to the vice president's limo, and I would go into the West Wing, and my wife would go next door into the old executive office building. So I always remember that memory as being pretty special.
Very unique. I'm sure there's very few couples that can share that similar experience.
Yeah, it was fun.
So someone's asking about social media and the role that plays when it comes to photojournalism.
Well, nowadays it's huge because it's the #1 way people share images and are able to get their images out. It was interesting during my time in the White House, the internet was still being built. Basically, the White House website was just a skeleton when I joined the White House. I mean, we didn't have Instagram at the time. We didn't have Facebook, wasn't even around during my time in the White House. But it was something that you have to embrace because it's the #1 way you can get your work out, that you can show your work. But it's a huge benefit to be able to instantly show people what you're about, you know, how you see things and how in your experience. So it's very important.
Yeah, absolutely. So a question here from someone from audience. It must be difficult trying to be the invisible element working as a photographer. How do you place yourself to get the shot without disrupting the action?
Again, another tightrope act, you know, it's like, you know, walking on eggshells sometimes, especially in an environment like the White House where, you know, your #1 job is not to be disruptive, you know, do not piss off the president, right? That's like the biggest thing, because, you know, that trust level, that comfort level is the most important thing. You know, people call it, you know, I was a fly on the wall, but I called it more like I was a piece of furniture in the room because everyone expected me to be there. And the White House photographer is so unique because everyone in the White House is there to, especially around the president, is there to interact with the president, to brief the president, to give the president their views on things. But the White House photographer is the silent professional observer, you know, and so it's kind of a interesting job to be able to just kind of hang in the background and being a former journalist where I'm used to asking questions, you know, like, so I had to like turn that notch down a lot because it would be disruptive to stop and ask questions, you know, and so I had to kind of just go with the flow. But I had so much access that if I had a question, if I just waited to see how things unfolded, it would be answered later. Yeah. And that's the unique part of my job, is being able to see things in full context, you know, because I probably saw the president more than the first lady during those 8 years. And I think that was the most entertaining part of my job, is being able to watch all of these stories within the White House unfold, and knowing and all of it having, you know, history and context from the very beginning, you know, for all those 8 years, and it never got old. You know, it was very, very, very fun to witness.
Absolutely. We're at time, but with your permission, maybe we can squeeze in a question or two before we wrap up. So what helps you stay motivated? I'm sure there were days where you didn't feel like shooting photographs. You know, maybe the travel was extensive. How do you stay motivated and focused on your subject?
Well, you know, the White House I was always motivated, just because being having that privilege of being there and knowing what a unique, special situation it was, and the history. So I was always motivated in the White House, and knowing that, you're working directly for a president who gives you direct feedback as well. So that never got old. It was like after the White House, being motivated after having a job like that is different, so I have to kind of self-motivate and I always go back to just my nature of always using photography as a creative outlet. It's never really felt like a job. It's always been part of me, and it's always been my passion. So I've tried to maintain that all through these years.
That's great. That's great. Obviously, with the collection of photographs you shared, there are some very unique perspectives in your photography. Have you ever thought about putting a book together?
Well, I did a book. Matter of fact, it's called Front Row Seat. You can actually get it on Amazon if you like. It's actually encompasses the 8 years in the White House, and so I'm very proud of that body of work. It's a big coffee table book, and it's something that every White House photographer does. So right after the White House, I started, working on that project, and I was able to publish it in 2014. So it's out there. So if you want to buy it, I'll send you one for free.
Are you still friends with the Bush family?
I am. Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, the entire family's wonderful. His brothers, his sister, and then of course their children, and you get to know them very well. And President Bush, when they bring you in, they treat you like family. So it was very warm, amazing experience to be there, and you felt like you belong.
That's right. What an honor. So I actually want to give the floor back to you, Eric, for about a minute. If you have any last words of wisdom, advice for anyone who's looking to be a photographer, journalist, combination thereof. Any final words for folks in our audience?
Well, I always go back to, this amazing job that I was able to land, and I think the biggest advice is always it never hurts to ask, and that's what I did, because what's the worst that can happen? Someone just says no, basically, so I think that's my number one advice is never be afraid to ask for what you want.
Good advice indeed. And obviously it helped you get into the White House. So good advice. And Eric, before we turn things back over to the director, for anyone in our audience who's interested in maybe connecting with you for more advice and additional questions, are you on LinkedIn? Are you comfortable with folks reaching out to you?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, you can find me on Instagram, on Facebook. I have a handle called Prez Photog with a PREZFOTOG, both on Facebook and Instagram, but you can find me there.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, thank you again, Eric, for the time and for sharing that special collection. Again, amazing to kind of see the chronicles of, again, not just American, but world history. So thank you again for being so gracious and sharing that with us. Now I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Rodney.
Thank you, Eric and Cynthia, for a great conversation. Again, thank you everyone for joining us today. This session was recorded and will be up on our website in a couple of days. Don't forget to follow Eric on LinkedIn. Please join us on social media. Follow us on social media to learn about future programs like this. And we thank you for your time.
Thank you, guys.